Well, good morning and welcome to another week on my allotment. And if you watch YouTube allotmenteers or allotment YouTubers in the UK, there's only one thing they'll be talking about this week, and that's the weather. Now, we don't get the wildfires of California or the tornadoes of Tokyo, but the weather is such a topic in the UK because you never know what it's going to... There's nothing predictable about it. You know, the tornado in Japan is totally predictable. It's that season. So why the idiots of the Rugby World Cup took it to Japan in the tornado season is utterly beyond the general public. But yeah, the weather's been quite something. It has rained now for 2.5 weeks, and with a few exceptions, almost constantly. Right through the night, right through the day. Sometimes, like now, there's a very light drizzle, and then a darker cloud comes over and it drops. And my allotment is on the higher ground. You know, this row here that I'm on with John, Terry, another John, Nicky and Steve. We're on the higher edge of this plot. So we've got it the best, and my ground is flooded. I'll show you later, but there's standing water all over it. So I've been up here a few times for an hour or two here and there this week because I can't work. Everywhere is flooded, and I haven't seen anybody up here. John, my friend John's been up a little bit, but not a lot. He's got his granddaughter staying with him, so he has other pressures. But it's quite dire. And of course, you know, normally October's quite a nice month, and it prolongs the season. You know, my autumn raspberries are just mush on the plants, which is a real shame. And you can't do anything. I'm trying to prepare for winter, and you can't do anything because you can't walk on the ground. But anyway, I'm up here for the day. I've got the fire on because although it's not cold, it's that dampness that gets into you, and I just wanted to warm through the shed, and I light the fire. There's something in our inner psyche that, you know, you can sit in front of I can sit in front of a fire for hours and just stare at it. It's a comfort thing, it's a security thing. So yeah, I'm up here all day. I'm not planning to sit in front of the fire all day, and I've discovered that kettle's got a leak. Very, very tiny, but if you leave it on there with some water in, you come back in a day or two, the top of the stove's wet. So there's always something you've got to do, isn't there? Anyway, I've just made a few notes about today and other wider issues. So what have I got to do today? Well, big news on the plot. I'm going to dig up my sweet potatoes. And when I say I'm going to dig up my sweet potatoes, I'm going to dig the plant up and see if there's anything underneath. So that'll be a big reveal. I have absolutely no idea what to expect. There might be nothing, or I might have a few nice little sweet potatoes. We shall see together. I've got to dismantle the garden pea frames. I did grow some later ones called Eddie, but you know, because of this damp, wet, mild, cold weather, you know, they're not coming to anything. So the frames have got to come out of the ground. Yeah, so I've got to dismantle them today, and if by dismantling them and taking them out of the ground, it prevents, you know, excess rot. The old tomato plants have got blight, so they've got to come out of the ground. And I know everyone says, oh, you shouldn't put blight stuff in the compost heap. I'm putting it in the compost heap, and you know, we can get on with it. That's a wasp just come in. Yeah, they always find me when I'm on camera. Oh, weed. I haven't got my glasses on, you see. I'm seeing wood, compost, weed, compost and cover beds. I said to you on a previous video I might spend some money. Well, I've been out and I've spent 20 quid and bought a little bit of plastic. Not a lot, I'm going to trickle do it. So rather than spending 100 quid in one bash, I shall buy a little bit, little and often, and just cover the beds. As I've started to do. And you know, I said all along I wouldn't. Well, you might have been, those who watch me regularly will know I changed my mind with the ins and outs of the tide, and I've changed my mind. I am going to cover the beds, and it's not a bad move. All this rain, if it keeps on like this, we're going to have a really wet winter, and I want to retain the goodness in my beds. So we've got to cover a few more. I've got to remove all the old runner bean plants. they will come down and go on the compost heaps. I have already been emptying compost heaps and putting them on the beds. And I've got a bit more of that to do. Unfortunately, the row along the front of the compost heaps is underwater at the moment. Whether I can get to do that later on or just stand in the water, I don't know. When I empty the compost out the bays, I've then got a working compost heap that I've got to turn into, and keep this stuff moving, because although I've got covers on the compost heaps, they're not particularly, they're not particularly efficient covers. They're only made of old fencing, and the rain gets in the compost heaps, dislodges the oxygen and stops the composting process, so they need to be moved regularly. Right, I'm going to cut off the Atlantic giant pumpkin today, and because I need the compost underneath it, and it's grown as much as it's going to grow. It's now wet and mild or cold. Pumpkins don't grow in this weather, so actually it's probably more at risk of rotting. So it's coming off today, and I should probably move it up here, and then Barry and I can have our coming together of the pumpkins, probably on our firework night, which is coming up soon. Oh yeah, and I've got the onion sets have been here for about 2 or 3 weeks now, sitting undisturbed in plain sight, and they've got to go in the ground. So I've got to weed a bed and get them in, and they'll just have to put up with the rain and the wet. We'll see. I mean, they're meant to overwinter, so I'm sure they'll be fine. So that's what I've got to do today. How much of that I'll do, I don't know. I've picked today, Saturday, to come up here because of all the days over the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, this is the driest. It's still wet, but it's the driest, if that makes sense. Probably doesn't. So yeah, I'm going to have a cup of tea. I'm going to let the fire go out because it is now baking in here, and then I'll set to. Come and join me. I'd like to, I think it's that time of year when you go through some of the stuff that you've appraised about the allotment, and the successes of the year and the failures of the year. And I think I'll just go through a few of those with you now, if you don't mind me from reading from notes. And I should mention that some of these, I watched a lady called Jane's Allotment, I think it is, and she did the same. She was very clever at it. She did 5 points in 5 minutes, and she managed it. I can't do that. I waffle too much. But her points I agreed with, and I put a little message on her video to say that I was stealing them, and she seemed happy with that. I'm not really stealing them, I'm agreeing with them, and I wrote them down, and it sort of triggered me to do the same. So I'll rattle through them briefly, I say briefly, and you'll either agree with me or you won't be interested. So the first and most important thing is I've decided now I'm going no dig. I've mentioned it before, but I'm convinced by the evidence there is no need to dig the soil. Every time you dig the soil, you disturb it, you ruin the ecosystem, and people like Charles Dowding and others have done the science, they've done the experiments, they've done the trials, and the evidence is clear. So yeah, no dig. I have a flower bed, but having looked at the ladies on the plot, the ladies garden differently to the men. It's far more attractive and beneficial to have flowers growing at various points around the allotment, because that draws the bees in. The bees come down the hill from the hives to the pond, to the flowers, and then they go back. Well, I want them down the plot. I mean, I don't have a problem with pollination, but I think I need to just beautify the site a bit more. The garlic spray was a success. I wasn't particularly efficient at keeping it up and respraying, but I had a real problem at the beginning of the year. June was very wet and we had a lot of problems with slugs, and they ate a lot of my plants. Once I introduced the garlic spray, the problem virtually disappeared. So the garlic spray was a winner, and I shall be doing that again next year. I saw something, in fact I read an article by Alan Titchmarsh, and he said something that struck a chord with me, and it said, in a garden, two things are never big enough: a greenhouse and a compost heap. And anyone who's starting out in this allotment and gardening world, I would advise, my top tip for any new allotmenter, Mick and Deborah, is the first thing to do, I mean, other than, you know, start to try and clear the weeds, is to establish compost heaps. And anything and everything can go on the compost heaps. There's plenty of videos on YouTube of what to do and what not to do with a compost heap. But the main thing is, don't just have one, but have a row of them. Put them behind the shed, put them at the back of the plot. Make sure they're, in fact, probably the best place to have them, although we're not allowed to here, is in the middle, so that it's never too far to take the stuff. But you must have, I would say, a minimum on a normal size allotment, a minimum of 5 compost bays. And that gives you the flexibility to move the stuff from bay to bay and to do what I did, which is grow your squashes in them. It's fantastic. Grow backup plants. You know, let's say I'm successional growing my Calabrese and I want 6 plants once a month. Grow 8, because the slugs or the pigeons or whatever will consume 2 or 3 of them. So have backup plants in the greenhouse or the cold frame or wherever you do your seed sowing, ready to fill in that space when you inevitably lose sun. Labelling, probably the biggest thing of all. Label, label, label. In fact, I've got one in here off the compost heaps that I've cleaned with nail varnish remover yesterday, and the pen has run out, so we went to the garden centre yesterday and I've got some new pens and I should be labelling the compost heaps. I label everything. If I don't, I have no idea what it is. So label, label, label. And when you put the plant in the ground, move the label with it. I am only growing what I eat. Now that might sound like plain common sense, but everything and everyone tells me every year try something different. And this year I've tried, as a result of working with Kitchen Garden magazine, I tried celeriac and kohlrabi and the purple snap peas. Never done them before. The purple snap peas were very nice, but kohlrabi, no. Celeriac, well, we haven't eaten it yet, but the jury's out on that one. We'll wait and see. But I'm not, you know, and other people have grown cucamelons and all this sort of stuff. No, not interested. I want parsnips, potatoes, cabbage, cauliflower, all the staples that, as a plain Englishman, my wife and I eat. If my wife wants it for the kitchen, I will grow it. If she, you know, if I take a kohlrabi home and she goes, "What do you do with that? What's the point of me doing?" You know. Now I know there'll be people out there shouting at their computer screen, going, "Oh, you've got to try so and so." No, not interested. I know what I like, and I like what I know, and that's what I'm growing. No more fancy stuff. I'm not a fancy person, if you haven't worked that out. Keep a journal. Now I showed you it in a previous video, a big book with all, you know, and I never maintained it, and I'm going to do it next year. I'm absolutely determined that I will keep a journal, not just at the beginning of it in the spring, but right the way through. And a big project for next year is I'm going to try and assess cost. Every time I take, you know, I'm going to go to the supermarket at the beginning of spring and I'm going to price everything up roughly. It's going to be an assessment. It's not going to be exact to the penny. Price things up either by produce or by weight, and then every time I take it off this allotment, I'm going to put it in my journal, and I'm going to try and assess how much generally this allotment saves us in money. That's my big project for next year. I'm only growing potatoes in tubs. Finished with the ground, finished with Nemesis slug and all the rest of the blimmin' nonsense. It doesn't work. The slugs eat your potatoes, they certainly eat mine. We have very, very heavy soil here, and the slugs live in the soil and they eat the potatoes. And the potatoes I grew in tubs were fantastic. Not a single potato had a single bit of damage. Now, of course, that won't be the case every year, I understand that, but I'm trying to give myself every advantage, and growing potatoes in tubs is a no-brainer to me. I will be growing the Wolf and Butternut squash again. that was a seed given to me by Kitchen Garden magazine, and we grew them. And I still haven't counted how many we've got, but I'm going to guess I've got in the region of 80 Waltham butternut squashes. Now, you've seen them. Some of them are the size of apples, some of them are the size of pumpkins, and we'll use them all. And Cheryl made butternut and sweet potato soup the other day, and it was without doubt the best soup I've ever tasted. You could stand your spoon up in it, and I like that. So yeah, lots of butternut, Waltham butternut. I'll be growing again. I've got clubroot on this site, as you probably remember, and so last year, or this year, I grew a pack. I can't remember the seed company I got it from, but they all do them, of all the different brassicas that are clubroot resistant. Now, I don't know if I had success with my brassicas because I grew those, or it was just luck. I have no idea. I did lime them, but you know, if something works, don't try and assess it and investigate it. Just go with it. Those resistant varieties worked for me, and I'm going with them again next year. That is Crispus Brussels sprouts, Ladero red cabbage, Monclano calabrese, and the Killerton cabbage. I can't remember the name of the cauliflowers. I'll try and find that, but you know, it's easily available online. Clubroot resistant. Oh, and I'm doing a slight experiment this year. I've planted some of my garlic in the ground, and I've planted some of my garlic overwintering in pots in the greenhouse, and I'll see how that goes, and I'll let you know. I have read stuff and seen it on YouTube that you shouldn't plant garlic in waterlogged ground. Well, that's the only kind of ground I've got, so we'll see. That kettle should boil soon. Well, now's the moment. Let's find out if I've got any sweet potatoes. Well, not a roaring success, I have to say, and as with all the potatoes, full of holes, but nothing ventured, nothing gained. I'll see what Cheryl can do with them, maybe put them in a soup. Well, that's it cleaned up, but I'm not sure how much of it's usable because of the slug damage. So just a little experiment, hasn't really worked, and like I said earlier, next year I'm simply growing the stuff I can grow and we can eat. So enjoyed it, interested to see it, but I don't think I'll be doing it again. Well, it's starting to collapse the cover, so now's the time, especially as I need the compost, to cut off the pumpkin. So Barry, if you're watching this, I'm calling a close to it. This is as big as it's going to get, and I'm chopping it off. Now that was a success. I'm very pleased with that. Hello.
I spent an hour doing this, hour and a half doing this grass last weekend. It's just not funny.
No.
But I mean, you know, come on, that's grass.
Oh yeah. That's the key, don't cut it.
Wow. Obviously. Don't do anything. Yeah. That's the key. Leave it like that.
You can't be disappointed if you don't do anything.
I just don't get it. Me and Steve come up for a couple of hours Saturday and Sunday and managed to do loads.
Yeah.
He only has to come, we stood here last weekend and we went, it's gone beyond a few hours though, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Ours might have been. Maybe the box is just containing it a bit. Yeah, I think John was quite surprised because he was here when we came up last weekend. He just caught us making boy, you did loads last weekend. Even he was on for quite a while.
No, these are going up outside the shed now.
Yeah, that's what we did.
I'm not using them enough here.
Stay for a couple of months and it'll all be back up again and fine.
I'm sure.
Yeah, it will.
Well, I've had a good day, achieved a lot of what I wanted to, did a bit that I didn't plan to do, and didn't do some of what I wanted to do, but, you know, no complaints. Started emptying that compost bin, a bit more to do, but no beds available at the moment. And I've turned those two there, and the one on the end is now the empty one for me to fill. But you can see what's happening here with the ground, with all this rain. It's an absolute quagmire. So I'm going to obtain some cardboard from the garden centre and then put a chipping mulch on it so that this doesn't happen again. And, you know, the central part, this is only one day I've been here, and look what I've done to the ground. But, you know, what can you do? So I've managed to get a few beds under plastic now. Started getting the onions in, didn't finish it. Took the beans off of the archway, but not off of the main frame. In fact, you think I've been here all day, it's hard to see what I have done. And up here, I've taken the slabs that were down by the compost heaps, because they were underwater, they served no purpose there, and I've put them there, which is a bit I traffic a lot, obviously, and I'm going to put some chipping down here. And there's my little take home for the day. Well, that's the end of the day. It's 5:15. Been a few people up here today, which has been nice. Nice to see other people. But they've all gone now. And I'm about to go. So let's look back at what I was meant to do. Because it's always interesting when you set out with a certain target, whether you achieve it or you go off mission and do something else. But let's see. So dig out the sweet potatoes. Did that. Huge anticlimax. Nothing really worth writing home about. Dismantle the pea frames, done, and they're stored away for the winter. Compost the old tomato plants, done, they're gone. Weed, compost, and cover the beds. Done as much as I can do, did 2 or 3 beds today, and all the plastic I bought has been put on the beds, and they're ready for the winter. So that's a job well done. Remove old runner bean plants. Well, I did the small arch, but I didn't do the entrance arch or the main frame. I might leave them and just take the beans as a, you know, pod the runner beans and have the beans, the seeds themselves as a meal. So I'm not sure about that one yet. Turn the old compost heaps. Did both of those. That was hard work, and they're both done. Cut off the Atlantic giant pumpkin to access the compost heap. Well, I've just showed you the compost heap. It's nearly empty, not quite, but I have used it to mulch the bed. So the Atlantic giant is cut, it's finished, and I can now get the compost, so that job's done. And plant out the onion sets. Well, I'm about 3/4 of the way through that. So actually, And what wasn't on the list was this moving the slabs. The ground is so wet and the compost heaps. I'm standing down there in 2 inches of water, or I was earlier today, and it's just not sustainable. So I've moved those slabs, and if I get time tomorrow, I'm going to get my son and we'll go up the garden centre and get some large cardboard sheets out of their skip, and we'll bring them here, put the cardboard down, and then put some chip-ins on. So that will make a big difference. And wherever I've got mud here now, that's obviously where I'm doing my main walking. So I won't do it all in a day, but I shall make a start. You know, I've said in the past, I like the grass. It's nice to have grass. It looks good, but it takes me 2 hours to cut the 2 plots with the strimming and the mowing, all the way through the summer. And then come winter, I mean, we're not into winter yet, but already it's a quagmire. It's just not sustainable. You know, we've got October, November, December, January, February before we come out the other side, and we're only in the 2nd week of October, and I've already turned it to mush. So I've got to, I've got to be practical. So that's going to be a slight change, and I know it involves a lot of work, but so be it. So that's a job for the near future. So if you've managed to see this through to the end, well done, and thank you. Thank you to all those who've subscribed. I do appreciate it. And all being well, I shall see you again next week. Actually, next weekend we're helping my daughter move her stuff from her flat. So I shall be away next weekend. But I'm sure I'll get a bit of time up here and I can quickly knock out another video, even if it's just a short one. So either way, I shall see you next week. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.